Good morning, first grade. This is Miss Dorsey here, and we're going to go ahead and do a reading lesson together. Today, the story that we're going to read is called First Day Jitters, and our focus this week is going to be learning and playing together at school. While we're reading, we're going to be noticing the things that make school such a fun place and the things that can sometimes make school challenging. Here are some of the important people in our school community. We have Miss Weems, our principal, Mr. Pitts, our assistant principal, Dr. Sharp, the assistant principal, Miss Dorsey, me, your first grade teacher, Miss Hill, Miss Allen, Miss Williams, and Miss Johnson, who are also your first grade teachers. So what makes school feel like a community? A school feels like a community when every member of the classroom feels included, safe, and respected, when school is a place to make friends and work together, and when every member of the school community has something to contribute. While we read our story today, we have 3 different standards that we're focusing on. The first one is RL3. By the end of this story, you'll be able to say, I can describe characters, settings, and major events in a story using key details. Characters are the people or animals that the story is about. A setting is the place, time, or the environment of a story, so where the story takes place. And then the plot or the key details are the main event that happened in the story, so focusing on what happened at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. The second standard we'll be focusing on is RL5, and by the end of the book, you should be able to say, I can explain major differences between texts that tell stories and texts that give information. So we'll be deciding if this book is a nonfiction or a fiction text. Nonfiction focus on real books that tell information, teach, and explain. Fiction stories are stories that have made-up characters and events. And the last standard that we'll be focusing on is RL6. So by the end of the book, you should be able to say, I can identify who is telling the story in a text. There are 2 different types. There's first person, which is a personal narrative, and we'll hear the words I, me, we, our, and us. That means the one telling the story or doing the talking is the one who had the experience. They're actually in the story. The other option is the third person, which has a narrator or a speaker. We'll hear words like he, she, them, his, hers, and theirs. This means that someone is telling the story, but they're not in the story. So the book we're reading today again is called First Day Jitters. In this story, Sarah Jane Hartwell would rather stay in bed than face her first day in a new school. She won't know anybody, and she is sure it will be awful. Read to find out what happens when she finally enters her classroom. So I want you to think, how did you feel on your first day of school last year? And then I want you to think, how do you feel about your first day of school this year? So in our story today, First Day Jitters, Sarah Jane Hartwell has the jitters. So I want you to think about, what does the word jitters mean? Look at her in the picture and think about, what does jitters mean? So if you have the jitters, you feel very nervous about something. It might feel like you have butterflies dancing in your stomach. The girl on the right, the black and white picture, she looks like she also has the jitters. Have you ever felt like this? Sarah, dear, time to get out of bed, Mr. Hartwell said, poking his head through the bedroom doorway. You don't want to miss the first day at your new school, do you? So let's think about the setting. Where is the story taking place? In the text, it did say Mr. Hartwell was looking through the bedroom doorway. So I'm thinking that the story is taking place in a house. I'm not going, said Sarah, and pulled the covers over her head. Of course you're going, honey, said Mr. Hartwell as he walked over to the window and snapped up the shade. Why might Sarah not want to go to school? I'm looking at the illustration. I can see her curled up in bed with the covers over her face, so maybe she's really tired, or maybe she's just really nervous. And I'm also wondering, who is Mr. Hartwell? No, I'm not. I don't want to start over again. I hate my new school, Sarah said. She tunneled down to the end of her bed. On this page, I can tell that this is a third person story because I don't hear the person in the story talking. I don't see I, me, and we, but I do see she tunneled to the end of the bed. If Sarah was talking, it would say I tunneled to the end of the bed. So I know this is a third person narrative. How can you hate your new school, sweetheart? Mr. Hartwell chuckled. You've never been there before. Don't worry. You liked your other school. You'll like this one. Besides, just think of all the new friends you'll meet. That's just it. I don't know anybody, and it will be hard, and I just hate it. That's all. So I want you to look at the two illustrations. We have a picture on the left and a picture on the right, and they look very different. I want you to think about what are the differences that you notice. I notice on the left that the children look very happy, they look calm, and they look like they're ready to learn. And on the right, the children look like they're kind of going crazy. They're not listening, and there's chaos in the room. What will everyone think if you aren't there? We told them you were coming. They will think that I am lucky and they will wish that they were at home in bed like me. Mr. Hartwell sighed. Sarah Jane Hartwell, I'm not playing this silly game 1 second longer. I'll see you downstairs in 5 minutes. Do you think Sarah should get up and go to school? Sarah tumbled out of bed. She stumbled into the bathroom. She fumbled into her clothes. My head hurts, she moaned as she trudged into the kitchen. Mr. Hartwell handed Sarah a piece of toast and her lunchbox. What do you notice about Sarah? I wonder who Sarah really is. They walked to the car. Sarah's hands were cold and clammy. They drove down the street. She couldn't breathe. And then they were there. I feel sick, said Sarah weakly. Nonsense, said Mr. Hartwell. You'll love your new school once you get started. Oh, look! There's your principal, Mrs. Burton. Sarah slumped down in her seat. Why do you think Sarah is slumping in her seat? I wonder if she's trying to not be seen by the principal and maybe pretend like she's not even there. Oh, Sarah, Mrs. Burton gushed, peeking into the car. There you are. Come on, I'll show you where to go. She led Sarah into the building and walked quickly through the crowded hallways. Don't worry, everyone is nervous the first day, she said over her shoulder as Sarah rushed to keep up. When they got to the classroom, most of the children were already in their seats. We have a different setting now. Where is the story taking place? I see desks and children, and I know Sarah went into the school, so the next setting in the story is the school, or we could even say the classroom. The class looked up as Mrs. Burton cleared her throat. Class, class, attention please, said Mrs. Burton. When the class was quiet, she led Sarah to the front of the room and said, Class, I would like you to meet your new teacher, Mrs. Sarah Jane Hartwell. Were you surprised by that ending? I was really surprised. At the beginning of the story, I thought Sarah was a student, or a little girl, and at the end of the story, I realized she was an adult and she was a teacher who was just nervous. So the message from this story is that most people feel nervous about new situations. And the first day of school can be nervous and scary even for teachers. So let's talk about some of the things that we figured out in the story. So you're supposed to be able to say that I can describe characters, settings, and main events in the story using key details. So let's talk about the characters that we saw in this story. One of the characters we saw was Mr. Hartwell. The other character was Sarah Jane Hartwell. They were the two main characters in the story. Now let's talk about the setting, where the story took place. At the beginning of the story was taking place at home. And at the end of the story was taking place at school. On the next slide, we're going to talk about the plot, what happened at the beginning, middle, and end of the story. And we're also going to talk about whether the book was fiction or nonfiction. So this book wasn't giving me any real information. I didn't learn anything, and I didn't get any facts. But the story was made up, and it had characters, and it had events. So we're going to be able to know that this story is a fiction text because it's fake and it's made up. And we also are able to tell me that you can identify who was telling the story in the text. So I put out a little clip from the story. No, I'm not. I don't want to start over again. I hate my new school, Sarah said. She tunneled down to the end of her bed. So I can tell that this is a third person because I saw the words she and her, and I can tell that Sarah is not telling the story because she didn't say I tunneled down to the end of her bed. So we know that this is a third person narrator telling the story today. And this is what happened in the story. So at the beginning of the text, Mrs. Hartwell, or Sarah, didn't want to get out of bed. In the middle of the text, Mr. Hartwell got Sarah to school, and Sarah walked up those stairs and got in the classroom. And at the very end of the text, we were able to find out who Sarah Jane Hartwell was, that she was the teacher. So your next job is to go back onto Google Classroom, and you're going to finish your assignment that goes along with the book First Aid Jitters. The most important thing you're going to do on your assignment is type your name. That's the first thing that you'll do, and then you're going to go through and find out the answers to the characters, setting, the text, and whether the book was fiction or nonfiction. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on ClassTag, or you can post a comment in Google Classroom. I hope you had a fabulous time reading this book. I hope you have a great day.